Welcome back to the 2014 college football season. For those of you who don't remember, allow me to refresh your memory. 2014 was the start of a new era in college football, the playoff. The BCS, which had had its fair share of controversies, was finally dead. For the first time ever, 4 teams had a chance in the postseason at winning the national championship at the top level of college football. On top of that, a committee would be deciding which teams would make the playoff compared to the competitors of the BCS era. So besides the playoff, let's look at what were some of the biggest storylines that happened off the field heading into that season. Number 1. The targeting rule was changed so that it wouldn't be a 15-yard penalty if the targeting call was overturned, like in years past. In addition, the targeting definition was expanded to making forcible contact and stating that any forcible contact made to an opponent with the crown of the helmet was considered a targeting foul. Number 2. There was no NCAA football game released this year after a lawsuit had been filed the previous year against EA Sports claiming that it was using name, image, and likeness of players. This was the first year that a college football video game hadn't been released since 1992. It would also be the start of a 10-year drought that we would not get a college football video game. Number 3. Reigning Heisman Florida State quarterback Jameis Winston had been cited for stealing crab legs from a grocery store in April, but this would be just the beginning of the Jameis Winston saga in 2014. Number 4. There was more conference realignment happening in what seemed like a never-ending story, but it wasn't quite as many teams in the big conferences as prior years. The big-time moves this year were Maryland and Rutgers joining the Big Ten, while Louisville joined the ACC. Number 5. There were a lot of big coaching changes in the offseason, including Steve Sarkisian going to USC, Chris Peterson going to Washington, James Franklin going to Penn State, Charlie Strong going to Texas, and Bobby Petrino going back to Louisville. Okay, so what about the new freshmen? These were the 3 true freshmen that were expected to make the biggest impact in the 2014 college football season. Starting with LSU's Leonard Fournette. The number 1 recruit in the class of 2014 was considered by some to be the best running back prospect since Adrian Peterson. And with Jeremy Hill leaving early for the draft, he had a chance to be the starting back from the get-go. Next we have Texas A&M's Myles Garrett. The number 2 recruit in the class of 2014 was an absolute monster of a pass rusher. With the issues that Texas A&M had on defense in the years prior, he was going to have a chance to make an immediate impact. And then we have Michigan's Jabril Peppers. The 5-star athlete could play on both sides of the ball, but ended up deciding to be a defensive back for the Wolverines. In addition, his ability as a returner could help give the team an immediate boost. Now going into fall practice, here are some of the biggest storylines. Number 1. Ohio State was going to have to play this year without their star QB Braxton Miller, who needed shoulder surgery. They would have to turn to redshirt freshman JT Barrett to lead the offense. Number 2. Who would replace Johnny Manziel at QB at Texas A&M? The Aggies had to replace their greatest QB in history, but they did have some good options including Kenny Hill and Kyle Allen. Number 3. Could Will Muschamp and Brady Hoke escape their hot seats? After both coaches having mediocre seasons in 2013, they both went out and got new offensive coordinators to help boost the offense. Number 4. Could the SEC get back to the top of the college football world? After winning 6 straight national championships, the streak ended with FSU beating Auburn in the 2013 season. But the SEC still had a lot of talented teams. Could they even possibly get 2 teams in the first ever playoff? Now that we've got that all out of the way, here's what the AP preseason poll looked like, with the defending champs in Florida State being ranked number 1, and the rest of the top 5 being Alabama, Oregon, Oklahoma, and Ohio State. Here's a look at the top 10 players heading into the 2014 season according to 247 Sports, as well as the top 10 players with the highest odds to win the Heisman heading into the season.
They're going to keep pounding away at that depleted line. LSU leads.
20, Jameis Winston hurdles inside the 10, sidesteps a tackler, and dives to the end zone.
Underneath, looking for true.
Throws, and it's intercepted again, and that's going to be the ball game. He's going to take it. Touchdown.
First down 10. It's Wilds. Huge hole. Stiff arm. Gamecock touchdown.
And it is Murphy into the clear. Touchdown. This is what he does better than anybody in the SEC. Touchdown.
Williams again. Cuts it back. Carlos Williams headed for the end zone. The Seminoles survive.
They give it to him. He stopped. Aggies win. It's Hansbrough.
Second effort, I think, got it.
We still don't have a signal. Touchdown.
There's the snap. Wallace into the end zone. Got him. Touchdown, Jalen Walker.
Urkavici sets, loads up, and it is caught! Jalen Strong!
Extreme four-man rush. Marshall.
Oh, wow. A duck. A duck. He got it.
Cricket, hot slot, right on the number. Over, see ya! Touchdown!
Golson rolls, fires, touchdown! A flag is down, hold on.
Pass interference on the offense.
Rolls out of the pocket. Touchdown, Utah!
Wallace runs around, fires far sideline to the end zone, picked off. Game over.
Before the start of Week 9, it was time for the first ever college football playoff rankings to be revealed. And here is what the first ever top 4 teams looked like, with Mississippi State at 1, Florida State 2, Auburn 3, and Ole Miss being the last team in at number 4, with the first 2 out being Alabama at 5 and Oregon at 6 if the playoffs had started that day. Before we continue on, here were a couple of other observations heading into the last few weeks of the season. Number 1, was Florida State really a playoff team? The Seminoles have been struggling with almost all of their opponents that season. On top of that, they had some more off-field issues with their quarterback in Jameis Winston, as he had yelled out an inappropriate comment at the Student Union Center the week of the Clemson game and was suspended also for that game. Number 2, was Mississippi the best state for college football that year? Both Ole Miss and Mississippi State were ranked in the top 3 for the first time ever together, and both teams seemed like legit title contenders as both of them had beaten their top 3 ranked team. Number 3, there were a lot of upsets happening, especially in Week 6 when 4 of the top 6 ranked teams lost, which hadn't happened since 1990. But there was a lot still to play for in the final weeks of the regular season, so let's get back to it.
Bring a blitz. Quick throw out to Hoon. Guess who? Treadwell weaving through and to the end zone.
Possession of the ball prior to making the goal line. Therefore, with a fumble, the ball is recovered by Auburn. It results in a touchdown.
And the Frogs, frustrated, find a way.
Pulls up, lobs it into the end zone. It is tipped and incomplete.
And he's going to throw it long. And he's got a man there on the run. Gone. Touchdown.
What was he thinking?
Oh, my goodness.
There's Cooper. There's a touchdown.
We'll see 2:38 at the half. Gordon again! Inside the 5, touchdown! What a performance by Melvin Gordon!
Up the middle, first down, stiff arms, hop, skips at the 40. P-line, 40, P-line.
There it is.
4:27.
27 straight for FSU. Passes intercepted. Georgia Tech wins it.
Rushing it 177 so far.
Here's Wilkins again. Back pass. Cody Kohler.
Winston to the end zone, in traffic, touchdown.
Devin Smith again.
12 gauge, baby.
Wrapping up the 2014 regular season, let's look at the final college football playoff rankings reveal. Starting at number 1, it was the SEC champion Alabama Crimson Tide with a 12-1 record. At number 2, the Pac-12 champion Oregon Ducks with also a 12-1 record. At number 3, the ACC champion Florida State Seminoles, who were the only remaining undefeated team left in college football. And for the 4th and final spot, it would come down to 3 teams: Baylor, Ohio State, and TCU. All 3 of these teams had just 1 loss and were conference champions. And while Ohio State had arguably the worst loss of the 3, they had also won 11 straight and were coming off a dominating 59-0 win in the Big Ten Championship over, at the time, number 13 Wisconsin. And in the end, the last team to be selected for the first ever college football playoff was the Big Ten champion Ohio State Buckeyes at 12-1, which left Baylor ranked at 5 and TCU at 6. For the 2014 Heisman Trophy, there will be 3 finalists, which included Oregon quarterback Marcus Mariota, Wisconsin running back Melvin Gordon, and Alabama wide receiver Amari Cooper. While Melvin Gordon looked to be the favorite, having a historic season and holding the record for most rushing yards in a game for a week and the second most rushing yards in a season in college football history as of recording this video, he was shut down in the Big Ten championship game, and that would end up costing him the Heisman. Instead, the winner of the 2014 Heisman Trophy was Marcus Mariota, who would finish the season with over 4,000 passing yards, 42 touchdowns, and just 4 interceptions, along with 770 rushing yards and 15 rushing touchdowns. But now it was time for the first ever college football playoff. Starting with the first ever playoff game in the Rose Bowl. It was a close game for the first 2.5 quarters, with Oregon leading Florida State 25-20 midway through the third. As for how the rest of the game went, this play pretty much sums it up. As Florida State would have 5 turnovers, all of which were in the second half. This would help Oregon score 34 unanswered points, and the Ducks would go on to win the first ever college football playoff game 59-20. Now for the second playoff game in the Sugar Bowl, Ohio State was playing with their third-string quarterback,
Cardale Jones.
People were wondering if the stage would be too big for him, and it certainly looked like it early in the game, with Alabama jumping out to a 21-6 lead. But then, Jones and the Buckeyes would settle in and score 28 unanswered, and this 85-yard touchdown run by Ezekiel Elliott would help seal the win and send Ohio State to the national championship game. What started off with 128 teams in the hunt for the national championship was now just down to 2.
Kyle Clinton, the fifth-year senior from Dublin, to kick it off and begin this first championship game of the playoff era.
No matter who won this national championship game, it was going to be a big deal. Could Oregon finally win their first national championship? Or would Ohio State manage to do the impossible and win with their third-string quarterback? After Oregon scored a touchdown on their opening drive, Ohio State scored 21 unanswered and took a 21-10 lead into the locker room at halftime. And while Oregon would cut it to 1 midway through the third, that's as close as they would get, as Ezekiel Elliott took over again for Ohio State, as he would score the final 3 touchdowns of the game to give Ohio State their first national championship since 2002.
And the Ohio State Buckeyes are the first national champions of the playoff era.
While what Ohio State did by winning their last 3 games with a third-string quarterback was impressive, what Ezekiel Elliott did in those last 3 games for them was even more impressive. These were his stats in their last 3 games. He was averaging 9.2 yards per carry in those 3 games. On top of that, Zeke will be back next year to help Ohio State try and defend their title. Winning the first ever college football playoff was already a big deal, but could they win the first 2?